We've got a great group of people with us today on the AAA Radio Experience, but I want to start by introducing you to Deb Birdsall, who is the author of the book, Overcoming My Mother's Addictions. Deb, welcome to the AAA Radio Experience.
Thank you. Thanks for having us today.
I think you may be the nexus or the reason that the other people around the table are around the table. Would you introduce to us the other two special people that are here in the studio with us today?
I have two other very special people with us here today. I have Karen Pershing, who is the Executive Director of the Metro Drug Coalition. Am I saying that right, Karen?
You are.
All right, yes. So happy to have you here with us. And my very special and sweet 11-year-old granddaughter, Lili, is here with us today as well.
Lili's the star of the show. Let's give it up for Lili.
Yeah.
So let's start here. Why did you write this book? I would love to know the origin story. It's one thing for you to go through something. It's another to go through something and say, this didn't just happen to us, it happened for us, to be leveraged to help other people. What brought you to writing this book?
Well, it was interesting because I knew I was going to write a book. And to be honest with you, Hallerin, I thought that I would be writing a book from the perspective of my husband and myself in dealing with the juvenile system in trying to protect my granddaughters because of their mother's choice, my daughter's choice to use drugs. And I woke up one January morning, this last January, with the realization and understanding that no, this book was not going to be written from my perspective. It was going to be written from the perspective and the voice of my 11-year-old granddaughter, Lili. And I immediately got out of bed at 3:33 in the morning and started typing, and that's how this book came to be. It's something that is near and dear to my heart, protecting the children, and unfortunately, so many of our children are faced with similar circumstances right now in their lives, and it just breaks my heart to know that they're out there suffering, needlessly suffering because of the choices of the adults in their life.
Tell me your daughter's story first.
Well, my daughter, by her own admission, started using drugs when she was 11 years old. I did not realize it until she was 17.
Same age as Lili.
Yeah, same age as Lili, exactly. And she has lived a really, really rough life because of it. And at one point, my husband and I were actually raising all three of my granddaughters, Lili and her two half-sisters. They were 2, 3, and 7 at the time, and my husband is now 75 years old, so that was about 3 years ago, and there's some challenges associated with raising little ones when you're a little bit older like we are. So, it's been an interesting process to walk through, and I think more than anything, what I wanted to share through this book is how important it is for the young people that are dealing with similar circumstances to understand that their parents' choices do not have to define their present and future happiness. They can choose a life that is different from that which they've grown up with, that which they have come to know, as long as they're given the tools, the resources, in order to know how to work that process.
So where's your daughter now?
My daughter, Lili's mom, is currently back in jail. Again, she's in and out all the time. But she did read the book. She read this book, and I was, actually, I'm calling it the first miracle of this book, Hallerin, because she read the book and said, after she read it, that she hopes that it does help a lot of people. And she told Lili, she said, I am so proud of you doing this, because Lili co-authored this with me, collaborated with me on this. She said, it's really important to understand that you don't want to keep these things inside, because if you do, you tend to make poor choices. And she actually apologized to Lili for all of the pain that she has brought into her life. So I'm hoping when she gets out this time, she's talking about going into a transitional home here in Knoxville or in Lebanon. And that's my prayer, is that she will do that. And that's honestly one of the audiences that we're reaching out to. This book has been quite an experience to write and to promote. And so one of our audiences is for addicts out there, people who are suffering with addiction. If they are wanting to move into a place of permanent recovery or are in recovery and debating on whether or not to stay in recovery, and they read this book, my fondest hope is that they will read it and say, you know what, I don't want to do that to my children anymore, and they will choose a permanent recovery. So that's one of the 4 audiences.
The book is entitled Overcoming My Mother's Addictions, and written by Deb Birdsall in collaboration with her 11-year-old granddaughter, Lili, who is here in studio with us. Lili, welcome to the broadcast. How did you come to write it from her perspective? What was that collaboration about? And Lili, how did you feel about taking your experience and putting it into a book to try to help people?
I felt fine. I mean, I was okay with it because basically lots of people already know about my story, and so I was okay with like even more people knowing about it if it helped them.
So, as an 11-year-old whose mother has an addiction, what has your life been like? What has that been like for you, and what story do you tell in the book here?
My life has been very, very hectic, and lots of bad things have happened.
For instance, what are some of the things that you talk about in the book and about your experience?
When I was when I was living with my mom and Sophia and Delilah, my 2 little half-sisters, I used to always have to take care of them, like feed them, bathe them, and stuff like that. And so that, and then I would also get 1 macaroni and cheese like a day that I made myself, unless I was like in my stepdad's restaurant.
So you would only have like 1 meal a day. You had to take care of your little sisters. So you're hungry, you got all this stress on you, and you're trying to go to school at the same time?
Yeah, most of the time I would be missing the bus though.
How did that affect you emotionally? How did you survive? What were you thinking?
I was always thinking, like, I wonder what's going to happen next.
You're listening to the Triple H Radio Experience, NewsTalk 98.7 WOKI. I have with me Lili Birdsall and her ghostwriter, Deb, her grandmother. Thank you for joining me today. You said that you ended up, your mother has an addiction. Your mother is in jail. A lot of bad things happened. You mentioned the fact that you were hungry. You were taking care of your half sisters. You were on edge every day, waiting for the next bad thing to happen. And you realized, maybe through God, that the only way forward was through the pathway of forgiveness. How did you get there? And maybe talk a little bit about your relationship with God.
I always believed in God ever since I was like little. Always like pretended, like not really pretended because it's real. Like I would have like somebody standing next to me or whatever, and like I named her Rosie. It was my imaginary friend, you could say, and so that like I always like talked to her, and it was kind of helping me believe more in God, and then yeah.
So in these conversations with Rosie, right, your spiritual friend, at what point did you get to where you're like, my mom has some brokenness that she has to deal with, but I need to forgive her? Do you remember that moment when you agreed within yourself that forgiveness was best? What was that?
Well, it only happened about like a couple months ago.
Really?
Yeah.
Tell me about that moment.
When she came to read the book, and I just came in the house, and she like basically said I'm sorry, and then I forgave her then.
What was it like seeing her?
I mean, it was normal. It was fine, but it was like a little scary.
So at the point and the moment of forgiveness, did you guys hug? Did you what was?
Yeah, we hugged.
And then you were like, I got to let this go.
Yeah.
Because I would imagine you would be afraid. I would imagine you would be angry. I would imagine there's a whole flood of emotions. Deb, what were you Were you there as this happened?
Oh, I was there, yes, and it was beautiful. And then I said, "Hey, I want in on this," and so of course I hugged my daughter as well. I had decided a long time ago that for me, and as an adult, we think things maybe a little bit differently or come to a place of peace. But I come to realize that people have their choices to make, and we have no control over their choices. And no matter how much we want to help them, they have to want to help themselves first. And so once I had worked the process to make sure that my granddaughters were protected, I had to let go of the need to decide what path my daughter was on. I made a decision a long time ago that if it was her path to leave this life at a young age because of her choices, I would mourn her passing greatly. But I would know that I'd done everything that I could to help her. And one of the things that we have done is to protect her children and to give them the stability that they need. In the book, it talks about the fact that Lili has lived with 4 different families 8 different times in the first 10 years of her life. And that's a tough thing because actually the last year and a half since my husband and I have adopted her, took her back in with us and adopted her, this is the most stable environment that she has been in, and that's a challenge for Lili. It's a challenge for all children that have been gone from one place to the next place to be able to trust that it's safe to stay where they are right now and to feel comfortable with that. So that's been an interesting process that we've been going through, and Lili is an amazing child. As I said at the beginning of the book, the moment she was born, and I was there when she was pulled from her mama's belly with a C-section, I was God told that this child will be a peacemaker. She will be the next Henry Kissinger of the world, are the words that I heard. And I went, whoa, no stress there, God. Thank you very much for sharing that. And Lili has always been an old soul, and I think that has been helpful for her tremendously in walking the path that she has had to walk. A lot of us don't learn the lessons that she's learned until we're older, and she's learned that at a very young age, and it's going to be incredibly beneficial for her in the work that she's going to be carrying forward into this world.
Karen Pershing, let's talk a little bit about drugs for just a moment. If you've never walked that path, it's hard to imagine just the tremendous force of addiction. It can derail any and everyone. And maybe the most pernicious thing about addiction is the deception, the belief that you can handle it.
Exactly.
Tell us what the stats are and what you guys are learning.
Well, I mean, we know from the science of addiction, that the addicted brain changes. And so when that change happens, it's not a matter of will anymore. And so it may start off, the initial use as a decision and a choice, but then it becomes a physical and psychological need and a drive. And so it can take anywhere from 12 to 18 months, sometimes up to 24 months, for someone's addicted brain to heal once they stop using drugs. And so there's a recognition among people who are using that they could die, that they are hurting others, but there's these cravings and these things that happen physiologically and mentally with them that unfortunately keeps them using until they get to the point where they say, it's enough, I can't do this anymore, and they reach out for help. But I see a lot of people every day. Half of my staff is in long-term recovery. Recovery is a beautiful thing. You see families heal. You see those individuals heal. You see them become contributing members to the community. But in the meantime, when they're in active addiction, they're tearing their families apart, and their children are suffering. And so, again, we see with our Department of Children's Services here in Tennessee, because of the opioid crisis, the numbers of kids in state custody have just boomed. I mean, there's just so many children now that are being removed from their homes as a result of their parents' substance use disorders.
Would you describe what you see as us being in crisis?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, Deb's book is such a reminder to all of us that if we just focus on the person with a substance use disorder, we're not going to heal as a community.
Right.
We have got to focus on these families and getting these families and these children in a better place.
You know, what you bring to mind is the impact and the interconnectedness of our lives. So that if your mother has an addiction, all of the things that happen to her in some way turn around and affect you, right?
Yeah.
You're like, yeah, that would be true, right? But I don't think when we're in ourselves and only thinking about ourselves, think about the sweeping effect of our lives on other people's lives.
Something that I've used as an analogy when talking about that is living with someone in active addiction in the family is like living with a pipe bomb. You know it's eventually going to explode, and when it does, pieces of shrapnel fly everywhere. And the people that are the people that are affected the most are the ones that are on the outside looking in. The addicts, not so much so, because they're already numb to the world that they're living in. And it is a wide sweeping, very damaging situation when you have addiction in the family. And I know that there's not an addict out there that would say, I love being an addict. I don't believe that